Enjoy the time, talk to each other, tell each other your memories of Andy, because so many people come from different strands of his connections. There's the
I'm an electrical fan.
there's the Electricians Society. There's the Goon Show Society. There's Andy's music. There's his connection with the railways. There's his connection with the Royal Navy. All sorts of things that he often kept separate. But the purpose of this is to celebrate Andy, his life, his music, and his connection. So please enjoy.
Call out the instigators, because there's something in the air. We got to get together sooner or later, because the revolution's here, and you know it's right.
That was Thunderclap Newman when they played for us last week, Something in the Air, their new record. We had so many letters asking us to invite Thunderclap back for more that what could we do but happily grant the requests. So here they are again, this time with the B-side of their record, Wilhelmina.
Wilhelmina is plump and round, plump and round. Wilhelmina is plump and round, plump and round, plump and round. Jacob and Peter and Fritz and Hans ask her permission to put up the bands. All she says is 999, no wedding bells for me. Each day they get keener on plump little Wilhelmina, the bride of Ziders Eve. Wilhelmina is plump and round, plump and round, plump and round. Jacob and Peter and Fritz and Hans ask her permission to put up the bands. All she says is 999, no wedding bells for me. Each day they get keener on plump little Wilhelmina, the pride of Ziders. Wilhelmina is plump and round, plump and round, plump and round. Jacob and Peter and Fritz and Hans ask her permission to put up the bands. All she says is 999, no wedding bells for me. Each day they get keener on plump little Wilhelmina, the pride of Ziders Eve.
I've got a message to give, and it's from someone you've all heard of, very famous guy. Some people may know him for the name that was to the purpose of the record, Bijou Dreams. Oh yes, yes. Others may know him as the guitarist with The Who, Pete Townsend. And he was the bass player on Something in the Air, and he also masterminded it, and he arranged it and did all sorts of things. Anyway, this is his message. Andy Newman was a true genius, in my opinion, lost in time between the pop music of the 20s and the 30s and that of the 20th century. He often worked miracles to bring those two eras together. Jazz has always been an uncomfortable partner with rock music, but Andy, when invited by me, rose to the challenge, and with our band, the eponymous Thunderclap Newman, created impressionistic musical departures almost entirely improvised that made basic rock songs into enchanting cinematic journeys back and forth through time. I first saw Andy when his method was introduced to Ely Art School, where I was a student. This was probably in the early summer of 1964. He asked for requests, and I think someone suggested the Beatles' Hard Day's Night. His version of the song actually gave us all two insights. One was that the Beatles' song was so much better than we thought, so much more orderly and conventional in structure than it seemed. The second was that Andy made it swing. He made it lilt and laugh, even more than it did in its original form. Andy's method was to bring a kind of adoration from the days of Bix Beiderbecke and men with bow ties, cornets and banjos to the modern age. Yet he didn't just play old trad jazz songs. He unearthed a plaintive poignancy and sadness from the trad jazz era that others seem to have missed. In a sense, Andy played a version of the blues that was rooted deeply in the razzmatazz frivolity of the 20s that everyone else failed to divine. Only in New Orleans funeral music do you hear what Andy was able to do so easily. He went so deep. I've been looking forward to making another record with Thunderclap Newman, but it's not possible without Andy. But I'm so glad I managed to find time in the busy schedule of the Who to work with him back in the late 60s and to have helped him reach a wider audience. As a person, he was eccentric and a loner, but polite, contained and only slightly ambitious, but was always looking forward to more recording. And at our last meeting, hadn't aged at all. It was a shock to hear he passed away, but he is most definitely not forgotten, and never will be. That's Pete Townsend. Now, a few of my memories. I met him in the 1980s. I first met Andy in one of these pubs in the West End. He was playing the piano solo, and I asked him about Hollywood Dream. Actually, I've come across one a month after the poor guy passed away. He would have loved that. He'd have got a laugh out of the fact, did you know there's only one person in the band, Speedy, according to the cover anyway. And yes, so he wasn't all that interested in Thunderclap Newman at that time. But some years later, in the 1990s, I got a phone call out of the blue from Andy Newman. And he wanted a copy of a book I'd written about the record producer Joe Meek, who he thought was a pretty interesting man. And then we struck up a friendship, and great. I've never met anyone as erudite, as knowledgeable about everything as he was. It's quite a good, yeah, give it to him. He was remarkably well read. What a guy, I mean, amazing. I've never known anyone like it. And in fact, for the funeral, I drew up a list. I phoned various people, a lot of whom are here tonight, and I asked them, can you recall anything in particular that you would say that he was expert at? Any particular subject? Well, I've got a list here. In fact, it's a little bit longer than it was at the time of the funeral, because I've had another couple. See if any of these ring a bell for you. He was expert on these subjects: telephones, steam engines, buses, trams, trains, railways, accidents on railways, the history of radio, electricity, the history of jazz, and dance bands, and he gave talks to the Gramophone Society. Natural history, birds, stag beetles, world history, London's sewers, boxing, the Goon Show. Well, I had something in common with him on the Goon Show, because in fact, for my sins, I'm still chairman of the Goon Show Preservation Society. Sorry, that sounds like a plug, but it does actually follow on to the next point. There was one of the first Goon Show meetings I invited him along for. I was interviewing an ex-film director by the name of Joe McGrath. And I won't go into all the films which he did, but one in particular was called The Magic Christian. The Magic Christian, it featured Thunderclap Newman, Something in the Air, on the end. Anyway, I was interviewing him, and I spoke about this, and he said, as soon as I heard Something in the Air, I thought, we've got to have that. That's got to go on the soundtrack. It's a brilliant record. And I said, do you know something? Were you aware that Thunderclap Newman is actually in this room today? He said, what? No. Thunderclap Newman? Where? And Thunderclap was sitting right in front of him and slowly rose to his feet like a great monolith. And this Joe, he was transfixed. He went over to him, he hugged him, and gave him a big kiss on the cheek. He was amazed. Well, later I saw Andy, obviously, had a chat, and he said, well, it was very nice meeting Mr. McGrath, but I'm not used to men kissing me.
So let's start at the beginning. I'm from Hungary. I was born in communist Hungary, and in '69, however, I was in Vienna at a school, and a friend of mine who lived near the Iron Curtain, literally like about 20 yards from the Iron Curtain, invited me to his house over the weekend. So I went there, and he had a little tape recorder, a Philips cassette recorder, and he played this song, and I was just blown away. So that was September '69, and I just couldn't believe it. I mean, that piano solo, it was just crazy. So 15 years went by, and Joe, guy who sits he's sitting here in the audience, he put an ad in Time Out. He was looking for musicians, and so I replied to that, and I met Andy Newman. And I always wanted to get him back into the music, and took me a lot of goulash, cooking of hundreds of goulashes, but he loved his food, and I think I won his my respect through cooking him the goulash, and that's how I got to meet Andy. And I must say what John just said, the fellow who was here, Andy was Wikipedia before Wikipedia existed. He knew everything. I mean, you know, anything from literature to music, to the gauges of railways in Australia. He just knew everything. Wonderful. So this is a song that I didn't actually write with him in mind. I just kind of, I think it's kind of fitting. He was a wonderful guy. I think of him a lot, you know. All kinds of everything remind me of him.
Surprise, who will miss me?
Doors are closing. Doors are closing. Doors are closing. Thank you very much. Andy, I think if you're right.
Thanks, it's fun. Next, another member of the Thunderclap Newman Band, David Buckley.
Thank you, Colin. First of all, I have to thank Colin because he was more or less our manager for a long time, and he did so much for us. And I can't tell you, it meant a lot to Andy, and I know that it was hard for us to get the chance to maybe thank him, but I'd like to thank him for that, and I know that Andy, was really appreciative of that. If anybody had ever met him, the main thing that I can sort of come up with is that he was the most ethical musician that I've ever met in my life. He was so honest that if he owed you 4 pence, he had a pencil and he would write it very clearly, Andrew Thunderclap Newman, well, he didn't put Thunderclap, did he? Andrew Newman, and then he would tell you exactly where the money had gone. If money had been spent, you would get your 4 pence, and you would count it out. He was incredible in that way. I have a lot of funny stories, but it would take too much time to tell those. There was one in particular, we did one gig in Putney, and he had to be locked in the dressing room. And this was largely due to the fact that somebody wanted to have sexual relations with him. And we had to lock her out. It was a bit of a mad evening, and I think Colin remembers that. But Andy loved it. It was the funniest thing in the world. She was screaming for Thunderclap Newman, where is he? Banging on the door. He survived. But I wrote this song while Andy was alive, but I never got the chance to play it to him. So this is the opportunity. And the reason behind it, whenever I had a bad throat, Andy seemed to pull out of nowhere a little packet of Fisherman Friends. And it was so helpful. My first thought was, what in God's name is this that I've got in my throat? And then if you just wait a bit, it actually works. It was miraculous what it could do. It really helped a lot. And I never forgot that. So that's a little thing that I keep a packet of Fisherman Friends in my house. Andy has met my son, my wife, and they all loved him. There's nobody who ever met Andy who didn't love him if they got the chance to know him. This is Fisherman's Friend. What me worry if the sky should tumble down? What me worry? What me worry? What me worry if it all should disappear? What me worry? What me worry? I've always been the fisherman's friend. I've always been the fisherman's friend. I've always been the fisherman's friend. If you ask me to drop my hook, line and sinker, I'll be sailing on down there to greet you. What me worry if the sky should tumble down? What me worry? What me worry? What me worry if it never comes to pass? What me worry? What me worry? I've always been the fisherman's friend. I've always been the fisherman's friend. I've always been the fisherman's friend. And if you ask me to drop that hook, line and sinker, I'll be sailing on down end it with this, and you can sing along with this. I see Johnny in the middle of a roundabout playing. In his hand was a paper aeroplane. Then I looked around, he was gone. Why? I see Jimmy on the little band and he's laughing. In his hand was a paper aeroplane. Then I looked around, he was gone. Why? I see Andy sitting at his keyboard and he's playing. In his hand was a paper aeroplane. Then I looked around, he was gone. Why? Everybody. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. That is the hardest thing I've ever had to do because I really miss him.
I met Andy first 1977 in the autumn, and we passed basically the key to the squad in Rectory Gardens on to him, and ever since we've been in touch. And 2 years later, he informed me that there was a place going in Leatherhead in view of the construction of the M25. So I was able to clinch a deal with the Department of Transport, and we rented the place for about 3 years. And in that development, because we didn't disturb any neighbors, we had 3 rehearsal rooms, we had 8-track, 16-track live recordings, and throughout Andy and myself, we always stayed in contact. We hardly talked about his career as something in the air. He kept that to himself, and I'm not the person to ask too many questions or so. So anyhow, to cut it short, I moved back to Germany eventually, and we had long conversations because I got a flat rate on a landline. So I can afford to call somebody in England on a landline. And Andy and myself, people can confirm that. When we started, and yes, what John Webster said, I usually call him like a walking dictionary. You would talk about a subject, and he wasn't connected to the internet. He somehow accumulated such an incredible amount of knowledge. Unbelievable. And, well, as the way it went, last time I met him in March, we had a coffee at the cafe at the Ritzy in Brixton, and we invited him for a meal, and he said, like, look, if I'm eating so late, I can't sleep properly. That was maybe like 8:30 or so in the evening, and that was the last. He didn't complain about health. We were chatting about, God in the world, a lot of what had to do with the rehousing in Rectory Gardens and details there. And I feel it's a shame that he hadn't more time to enjoy the new place he got from Lambeth Council from a housing point of view, because he felt very confident there. He had sorted everything out, and he has been my best friend in the UK, and I'm very, very proud to have met him. Very proud.
I'll try and throw a small insight into his time in the early 70s when I worked for Track Records between 1970 and 1975. I started there as a rather nervous office junior at 17 years old. And one of the first people who made friends with me was Andy. Something in the air had been #1 and gone, and they were waiting for the release of the second record which, as you probably know, was accidents. The delay in releasing accidents probably damaged the chart success of that record, and then the follow-up album, the delay in releasing that also damaged their future. The final straw was after a tour with Deep Purple in Europe, and then from what I can remember, they were going to go to the States to support The Who, and Speedy decided he didn't want to go, and that really broke the band up, and probably they could have, if they'd broken America, they could have been a lot bigger than what they were. So from that point, really it was the end of Thundercat Newman until the 90s when they were reformed and did small venues, and then went on to do the bigger thing with the big country guys. And then what someone else said was true, that he was about to do some new work with Pete Townsend. But unfortunately that never happened. Now I went up into my loft and I had a dig around, and I found a few bits and pieces from Track, which I'll show you, and I'll leave some copies on the table if anyone wants to look at them. One little thing before I go, because I'm going to keep it brief, was we were good friends with Andy, Jimmy McCulloch, Jack McCulloch, and Jim Avery. We were good friends with all of those. Andy actually came, stayed at my house once. He played a local gig and couldn't get home, so he stayed at my house. My mum put him up on the sofa, and when he woke up in the morning, he had both my cats were sleeping on top of him. When I saw him last year, those two cats had grown to about 8. He said, I remember staying at your mum's place, sleeping on the sofa. When I went up, I was covered in cats. He said about 8 cats. So he did exaggerate a little bit. But I'll just show you these. I managed to, Andy made a solo album for Track called Rainbow, and I managed to find some reviews of that album, which I've photocopied and I'll leave on this back table. And anyone, have a look at them. And I've also got a few articles. There's one there that I wrote early 2015 about Thundercat Newman, and there's a picture of a poster from when they did the Black Prince in Bexley, so I think you might find that of interest. And I also found the original Track 5-piece picture of the 5 of them, which is Jim Avery, Jack McCulloch, Jimmy McCulloch, Andy and Speedy. There is a signed copy, but guess what? Speedy never signed it, because when they did the press release, as usual, Speedy didn't turn up. So the 4 of them signed the photos, and they all went out to fans, but Speedy's picture isn't signed. I've brought the original of that with me, so if anyone wants to come and see me and have a look at it, let me know. And if, I don't know if Jack or Jim Avery are here, but if they're here, please come over and say hello, because I have fond memories of knowing them as well. Thank you very much.
My name is Carol. My husband, John Dias, and I met Andy in 1979. That was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. For 37 years, Andy was a loyal and faithful friend to John and me, and to all of us here. When he would come to visit us, we always had enlightening conversations. As many of you know, as many of you have already said, Andy's mind was encyclopedic, astonishingly so. But more than that, when he recounted an event in history, he made it come alive. When he had supper with us, which he did many hundreds of wonderful times, it was like having Churchill, Roosevelt, Mahatma Gandhi, JFK, and Betty Windsor sitting with us at the supper table. Andy turned the gift of the gab into an art form. He was such a great storyteller. But Andy was also someone who thought deeply about things, as we all know. He was a deep thinker. He was a true thinker. I think of him really now more than ever as an old Socrates. He knew that the important thing was to ask the right questions. We couldn't always come up with the right answers, but we could come up, sometimes if we're lucky, with some of the right questions. His thinking deeply about things gave him perspective and a balanced point of view. Sometimes on the telephone as well, it was just so wonderful to imbibe that mindset that he had. He had a very balanced way of thinking about things. And he had a great sense of humor. I mean, sometimes we laughed so hard that we couldn't speak. And that too was wonderful. And he had integrity. If he made a commitment to someone, he carried it through. He cared about his friends. He cared about all of us. And he had an old world courtesy. And he was a true gentleman. Thank you, Andy, for being a wonderful big brother to John and me, and to all of us here, and to all who couldn't make it but love him from wherever they are. We love you and we miss you, Andy.
Hello, I'm Steve, and I was a neighbour of Andy's for 30 odd years. Before I start my piece, I know a bit tight now, but I'd just like to read out something that a friend of Andy's called Paul Colonet, who some of you might know, sent me, and I think they had a mutual interest in big bands. And he says, Andy was the most interesting and knowledgeable about big bands, and I'd got to know former band leader Bert Fairman, who had been musical director of Zonophone Records at a remarkably early age of 18. In 1924, Zonophone was HMV's budget price label. Andy asked Mr. Fairman how he had been able to get such fine instrumentalists, e.g. from the great Ambrose Orchestra, for his studio recordings within the low budget. Easy, said Bert. I'd tell the HMV management that I needed to book the studio for both morning and afternoon sessions. The men were so professional that we'd be through by lunchtime, and I'd let them go then. They were happy with double pay. Sorry I can't be there. Kind regards to all and best wishes, Paul Colonet. Okay, I'll start now. When the jazz saxophonist Lester Young died in 1959, his friend and band leader Charlie Mingus wrote an elegy to him. He called it Goodbye Mr. Pork Pie Hat, because Lester usually wore a broad-brimmed pork pie hat. I'm sure our friend Andy must have known the tune. Maybe he'd even played it. He was fond of hats as well, although I don't know if he owned one of the pork pie variety. On stage he'd wear a Panama or a Stetson style number, but I knew him mainly in his day-to-day life in Rectory Gardens, where he was my neighbour for 30 odd years, until we all needed to move to help Lambeth Council balance their books. There Andy usually wore one of a variety of sun hats in olive, khaki or camouflage colours. You can see a few at the back there. I rarely saw him without one. I lived, worked, laughed and sometimes even argued with Andy. He was a mainstay of our unusual little community in Clapham Old Town, about 2 minutes walk from here. I suppose he was our most famous resident. He played the piano and about half a dozen other instruments. But for me, he was the guy who helped me rewire my house and explain the mysteries of company heads and two-way switches. And then the man who was always patient when our kids and the other local urchins followed him down the street demanding sweets, which he never seemed to run out of. He helped organise my disorganised bookkeeping when the time came to do the annual returns of our housing corp. Even when we disagreed, his quiet, calm way of speaking made me shut up and listen. I think he believed in old-fashioned things like politeness and respect for others. When our daughter Catherine started piano lessons at the local school, he made us a gift of his old red painted touring piano, so she'd have something to practice on at home. Of course, we took it with us when we had to move. It was murder getting it down 2 flights of narrow stairs, and it now stands proudly in our living room in Brixton. Catherine's away at university nowadays and doesn't get much chance to play it, but our other 2 do, and it sparked what I think will be a lifetime interest in music. I've even started bashing out a few chords myself. So goodbye, Andy. You made our lives better, and I know you left the world a bit of a better place. Maybe someone could write a tune about your hats so we could play it and remember you.
During the course of the next few moments, I will do my best to try and ruin the music produced. Just to mention, I was in Bob Kerr's Whoopee Band at the time of all that happening. And Andy used to come along and dep for us. I remember a tour of Germany once with him along with us. In those days, his favourite food, to which he was thoroughly addicted, was
Spaghetti. Jelly.
jelly. Yes. Who said jelly? Right. And I remember we used to stop at every service station so that he could have his fix.
Jelly roll.
I'd just like to mention that Bob Flagg wrote very recently, and he's in Japan at the moment, so couldn't be with us. Roger Ruskin Spear, he's off in Somerset, again, couldn't be with us. And all those members of the Whoopee Band, Bill Posters, Temperance 7, we all fondly remember Andy.
Can I just mention that I just received a letter from Bob Flagg.
This is Mr. Peter Shade.
And he says, Flagg is now half off.
This is just a pretty song by John Martin that I thought Andy might appreciate. May you never lay your head down without a hand to hold. May you never make your bed in the cold. You're just like a big strong brother to me, and you know that I love you true. You never talk dirty behind my back, and I know that there's some that do. try one more.
I'm not sure I can manage anymore.
There are places I remember all my life, though some have changed, some forever, none for better. Some have gone, but some remain. All these places had their moments with lovers and friends. Still can recall. Some are dead and some are living. In my life, I love them all. But of all these friends and lovers, there is no one compares with you. And these memories lose their meaning when I think of love as something new. Though I know I'll never lose affection for people and things that went before. I know I'll often stop and think about them. In my life, I love you more. Though I know I'll never lose affection for people and things that went before. I know I'll often stop and think about them. In my life, I love you more. In my life, I love you more.
I'll tell you, if I may, about future time after. I've just said a few words about Andy because, as many of you know, I lived next door to him for 40 years, so I knew him very well. He used to come round many times for the evening, have dinner. We used to have many chats over the garden fence, as neighbours do, and it's absolutely fantastic. And so I know the history of jazz, history of the electric light bulb, history of the physiology of many animals, and all sorts of other things. And one thing that people don't seem to have mentioned so far is Andy's incredible empathy with animals. He often, when we were away on holiday, he used to come around and feed all our many menagerie of animals, because we had tropical fish, freshwater fish, hamsters, cats, the lot. And he used to always come around and say, oh yeah, okay, and where are the monkeys? And so he was just amazing. And he used to take, he had, many of you might have known, he had a little Yorkshire Terrier called Miss Thing, who went everywhere with him, and in fact she was like an electrician's mate as well. Apparently she was like a little working dog who used to help him do the wiring in the house in all the places, because she was so little, and it was amazing. He used to go along with his little shopping carrier on wheels. I missed it. It was this little dog, and he was, you know, quite big. Yeah, I know, she was amazing, and she used to always stop at the butcher's and go in and get a few tidbits, and he would go on and then she'd come and so on. He was amazing, and he used to take our dog Callow out for many walks. He used to have a special little board And we just come home after going to work and he'd written on it, Callow's gone out with Andy for the day, we'll see you later. And many hours later, and we've met people like Ray and his wife Lanny who said, we know your dog. And even though we hadn't met them, they knew our dog. So Andy was taken for miles on trains, buses and everything. And one day he told me that he was very tired, wanted to go to bed, and he went up there and there was a swarm of bees clustered around the lamp in the middle of his ceiling. And he thought, I'm so tired, I'm just going to go to bed. And so he left the window open, he slept under the swarm of bees, and they went out in the morning. And that was like typical of Andy. He was like so amazing. So that's just another little side to Andy I thought I'd like to share with you.
Hello everybody. I can't emulate Andy in any way when I play the piano. The nearest I can get is to wear a hat. But what I'm about to say, he was such a cultured chap and so eloquent with his speech, and had to play with words. So here's a very short selection of words, and I'm sure everybody here can identify with it, and just listen, and then cheer at the end. Here we go. I hope you can try and understand me when I say, as of this moment in time and at the end of the day, and furthermore in an ongoing situation-wise way, that this party of the first part, i.e. me, harbours feelings of affection, i.e. love, L-O-V-E, for the party of the second part, you. We love you, Andy.
Just a couple of amusing stories. I'm Paul Royal from Manchester. I'm not in the best of health, I don't want sympathy, but I've had a hell of a journey really, but I just had to be here. I'd known Andy about 15 years through the City of London Phonograph and Gramophone Society, which I used to be chairman of our northern branch at Preston. He answered a little query I had in our magazine about 15 years ago, and we've been friends ever since. The thing is, until his death, I never made the connection between him and Something's in the Air. He never told me. He knew everything about me. I'm an ex-professional entertainer. He knew all about my career, but he never said a word. And apparently, there's 2 or 3 of our members here from the London Society. He didn't tell them either. So there's a very modest man for you. Anyway, a couple of amusing stories. I helped a friend of mine, a dealer in Manchester, a record dealer, with a stall at our fair we have every year at a place called Powick is it in Gloucestershire? I think it is, isn't it? Anyway, it doesn't matter. I was helping to man the stall, and Andy was there in his green German jersey with corporal stripes. I rather liked that. And he kept coming up to the stall I was helping to man with some 78s. Now I'm sure you all know the weight of 78s. Can you put them behind there, Paul, and I'll pick them up later? Yeah, all right, Andy. Come back. Can you put those with the... Yeah, all right, Andy. Well, my mate was going berserk. It was his stall. He was falling over this pile of 78s, which ended up about 2 feet tall. You can imagine the weight. Now, I didn't realise that he didn't drive. He brought, remember the old ladies' shopping trolleys with the 2 little wheels on in tartan? He brought one of those with him. He puts all this lot in the shopping trolley to come home on the train. Now, I don't know which station it was, but of course he had to change platforms. So he has to go up, across and down again. Consequently, the wheels, one by one, fell off the trolley. And he must have staggered back to London with this shopping trolley full of records. He couldn't wait to ring me the next day to tell me. He says, I haven't broken a single one. Now, the other little amusing story, I was working at a holiday camp in Bognor Regis. No, not Butlins, the other one, Riverside Caravan Park. And he's got a friend, or had a friend rather, at Chelsea, who I believe's got a stack of his records. Anyway, we met up there, and he took me to a pub and bought me a meal. So I thought I'd better reciprocate. So I invited him to, I picked him up and invited him to the caravan site, took him into the entertainment complex, showed him all the sound system and everything, which of course he was fascinated with, and we went back to my caravan. Now, the Tesco was next door, so I'd been there, no adverts, and got some ham and some new potatoes, and I got a stack of tins. I got peas, corn, broad beans, baked beans, mushrooms, you name it. So what I'm actually saying to the guy is he sat in the front of the caravan, I'm in the little kitchenette, I've got them in a cabinet and I'm reading up the labels. What you fancy with the ham and that? I said, we've got peas, corn, and I went through the lot, he said, yeah, that'll do. I thought, you're bloody joking, you are, pal. So I put the peas and corn together and he was quite happy. I can't believe, we spoke every week at great length. He was like me, he got a thing on BT where you ring for an hour and then you got to redial, and he'd say, shall I ring you back? And I'd say, well, give us 5 minutes while I go to the loo and make a copy with you. I mean, you can't see over the phone. I'd be like this talking to him, you know. We spoke, by the way, we spoke about music, although I didn't know he was Thunderclap. What we mainly spoke about was public transport. We've got a fantastic tramway system in Manchester now. It's currently 91 miles. It's incredible. And he wanted to come up and stay with me to go on that. I told him I'd never been on the DLR down here, so he said I must come and stay with him and he'd take me on that. Well, it never happened. I'm really going to miss him. I know you do. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
So how do you do, ladies and gentlemen? I do say this to you, all of you, and the wonderful speakers, the attractive and wonderful people who've come to this microphone today to pay homage to the great Andy Thunderclap Newman. But whether you like it or not, I was about to be thrown out into the street. I was working for 20th Century Fox Films. I'd been discharged from the Broadway Theatre as the assistant manager, and Andy appointed me his manager. I was with him for 15, if not 20 years, you see. And furthermore, my commander-in-chief, who's seated in front there, my darling wife, she used to cook him baronial feasts, you know, on our one gas ring, and she's the finest plain cook in England, I might say. And following that, Andy, I mean, food is a pleasure that will endure to the grave. And Andy was a recipient of her hospitality for 20 years, you see. But anyway, when he appointed me, I said, look, Andy, there must be somebody better than me. Put your fishing net out. He said, no, you've got oodles of class and some. I said, you bloody cockney. He was wonderful, beyond dreams. But I mean, the tragedy in Andrew Marr, and not to show him in a poor light, but if Andy was on the programme with him, he was such a, I mean, I passed through Cambridge, so I haven't had much of an education. But Andy was, I'd use a simple word that describes him fully. He's a very astonishing intellectual. And I mean, I took him to my naval club. I'm ex-Royal Navy, as you've gathered already. And I managed to get him to become an associate member. I said, Andy, if I get you a forged birth certificate, do you think you could enlist in the Royal Navy? Oh, thank you. He was a total individual. But I want to do a poem in his honor that he loved, which was my 10 Commandments and his. And Andy loved this poem, which I should do for you in a moment. But let me tell you this. I enhanced his career somewhat. I put him on stage with the Tornadoes, and they weren't fit to shine his toe caps. He was so fabulous. And I he wanted to go on the Buzzcocks, and as his agent, I said, no way. those people are there, they're cruel, heartful and spiteful and malicious. I don't want you embarrassed by them, Andy, and I refuse to let him go on the programme. And the first thing I said to them was, how much? I mean, you couldn't get Andy Newman for a tenner. But here's the poem, ladies and gentlemen, which my beloved friend, all of you, and Andy Newman. Here's the poem, and I hope I don't miss my footing. Here it is. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. Now, if you can keep your head when all men doubt you, make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting or being lied about, don't deal in lies. Or being hated, don't give way to hating. And yet don't look too good or talk too wise. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn, a pitch and toss, and lose, and start again at your beginnings. Never breathe a word about your loss. If you can walk with kings and not lose the common touch, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving moment with 60 seconds worth of distance run, why, yours is the earth and everything which is in it. And what is more, you'll be a man, my son. Well, Andy loved that, and so do I. But all I'm telling you, he was, as I say, he was a friend of 20 years. I never disappointed him ever. And I introduced him into my society. Out-of-work showgirls, Harris housewives, and numerous actors and ventriloquists. And he was the king of them all. We all loved him, and in your heaven, in your paradise, Andy, know that we're all today thinking passionately of you and remembering you, as we always will. And there you are. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I got to know Andy about 1976. It has been a privilege to know this great mind and this great soul for 40 years. I was setting up an exhibition of musical instruments using my own collection and that of colleagues when somebody said, there's a guy with a contrabass saxophone around. My God, I said, they're so rare. There's possibly only 20 in the world. And as far as I know, there's no other in this country. Andy allowed me to take it away and play with it many times during the 40 years. I collected it when he had to move house, and I've been giving it house room ever since, and, in my house. Briefly, it's a curiosity. It was made by the Italian firm Orsi of Milan in the 1960s to exhibit on their trade stand at the annual Frankfurt Music Fair. It was then acquired by George Howarth and Sons London company, and they exhibited it in their Islington showroom, where Andy saw it. When that firm in turn went out of business, Andy bought it for a very low figure. He then made a gigantic case out of fiberglass. I think a boat builder had something to do with it. And a stand, which it's standing on at the moment, adapting it from a stand for a smaller bass saxophone. Because it seems to be a non-production one-off instrument, which the makers never signed, the bell is that's the big end, is too small. So it's out of tune with itself. I have managed to bend it in enough to play it on bandstands, but it's not good for concerts.
I'm afraid you've heard a lot of this from my dad, I think. But yeah, me and my sisters, and yeah, Hannah over here as well, grew up in the street with Andy. And yeah, the street was a pretty ideal place for us to grow up. We'd stay out on kind of long summer nights, playing Stuck in the Mud and Murder in the Dark. And yeah, we'd be out all the time, weather allowing. And Andy was usually there, sitting in his deck chair, reading the newspaper. And looking back, I think we should have caused him a lot of grief if he wasn't such a nice man. Because, I'm not entirely sure how this started, but one day he must have made the mistake of offering us sweets. And ever since then, we'd hound him. Every time we saw him coming back from the shops or sitting out reading his paper, we'd run up to him screaming, "Andy, can I have a sweetie?" And yeah, he was amazing. He brought it with his, I don't know, typical kind of good-natured, stoic attitude. And although the sweets were much appreciated, especially as children, his greatest gift to us was definitely the piano, which he gave my family. So like my dad said, Catherine was learning, and there was one at the school, but she couldn't practice at home. So Andy decided we might as well have his old touring piano. And I remember coming back from school one day and watching them try to get up the stairs. It was, Andy, my dad, and Ted. And there's a lot of strained backs, I think, and precarious balancing.
Extemporising moments.
Yeah, it looked like the piano was trying to get home.
We had a few little events. We had a jumble sale. Do you remember we had the jumble sale?
Yeah.
And we had a little session in the garden.
Yeah.
And he used to have a little steam engine that he used to get out occasionally. That he used to get going. Do you remember the? I can remember a little.
Maybe
Jockens kids would probably
story a bit later, Tim, otherwise we might be here all night.
That's the point,
Yeah, I guess that just proves we've all got so many memories of him. Yeah, having that piano in our house was amazing, and yeah, like my dad said, me, my sisters and him have all learned to play it a bit, And yeah, it's nice to think he gave us some of his music, and that I guess in a way we can still hear his voice in our house. It's, yeah, the piano's, it's a little rough and out of tune in places, but I really like the sound, and it will remind me of him.
I'm very pleased to be here, though naturally not pleased with the circumstances, and what I'm doing is passing amongst you, thank you.
Come closer.
Sorry. I'm passing amongst you the sleeve for my copy of Something in the Air. I would be very pleased if you would all sign it, and I'm going to mount it high up on a wall so that it will be something in the air. And the next signature will be Ted. Yes. Good old Ted.
I usually put a little bird on.
Andy was my electrician. Yeah. And
Andy was everybody's electrician.
so a typical scene in Peckham Rye over the last 10 years I knew him for would be, hello Andy, welcome, would you like a cup of tea? Oh, I don't mind if I do. Did you know that the Golden Spike, when the Transcontinental American Railway met in Utah on May the 10th, 1869, Andy, would you like a cheese sandwich? Oh, that's very kind. Yes, the roots of the Siemens electronic engineering firm lie in Germany in the mid-19th century. Andy, should we get started? Well, if we look at the way that the cylinder was superseded by the gramophone record, 3 hours later. Do you want to do some electrical work, Andy? Yeah, he was a good lad, wasn't he? And he called my little boy Beautiful Child. That was his name for my little boy.
Oh, little Jimmy.
Little Jimmy, yeah.
Oh, he is?
Yeah, well. Sitting on a hillside, watching all the people die, I feel much better on the other side of the rise. I believe in magic. Why? Because it is so quick. I don't need power when I'm hypnotized. Look in my eyes. Life goes on here, day after day. I don't know if I am living or if I'm supposed to be. Sometimes my life is so eerie, and if you think I'm happy, count me out. once. I've been here twice. Oh, what's the chord? I don't know if I'm living or if I'm supposed to be. Sometimes I deal with numbers, and if you think you count me out. So we're going to stop here. We're all normal, and we want our freedom. We're all normal, and we come from Sweden. Sorry, I forgot a few chords, that's it.
Don't applaud yet. This will be very brief. I've been on a pilgrimage today. In March, my daughter and I had the privilege of meeting up with Andy for a meal. And in fact, we went to a pub and had a pint in the Garrick Arms, followed by a lovely salt beef sandwich in Gabby's Deli. Andy was on top form. I'd only known him for a couple of years. I met him at the inauguration of the unveiling of Spike Milligan's statue in Finchley about 3 years ago. As I say, Andy was in great form. He was regaling us with tales of his musical career, plus everything. And he was, as I say, on top form. You can imagine how I felt about 4 days later. I got a phone call from John Repsch, sitting there, to tell me of Andy's passing. So today, I've come down from Cheshire. I've been to the very pub with my daughter. We had the same, not quite the same pint rather. As you can see, the beer's working. But we then went to Gabby's and we did exactly what we did in March in memory of Andy, who was a true friend. The last thing I will say, I was diagnosed with cancer last year. I'm now pleased to say the only thing is I'm having to wear gloves because of the chemotherapy. I wasn't terribly well, and on Christmas Day I'm having my Christmas lunch and the phone rang. And it was Andy, who I'd only met, relatively briefly, trying to find, asking me how I was. And to me, that typified the man. He was a wonderful person. It's a privilege to have known him. Thank you.
The thing about Andy is that I remember initially somebody put it so beautifully inside, which was that you'd get a phone call, you'd pick it up and immediately, hello. He used to say, he'd speak in his posh voice. And it wasn't intentional, but it was his telephone posh voice. Hello, this is Andy here. And then you knew that you were in for a treat, because so what I would do is vacate wherever I was, make sure I was in a place for the next 3 hours, and Andy would sail into what was happening, giving you the news about the band, about meeting with Pete Townsend. He did talk about that, and then he would switch over from Pete Townsend, he would switch into maybe politics. Politics would come up, and he would launch into how terrible all these politicians are on every level, and he was always right. And then he would move into another area from there, maybe electrical engineering, and he would probably talk about the first college of electrical engineering that existed. He would know the dates of when it happened, and he would bring up the president of that college. And the president of that college, in fact, gave a speech one time or something like that, and it would go into this, but then he would also tie it together in the end, so he would never lose anything. The gigs were amazing. I mean, there were stories as well. I mean, Ishram and I know well, he used to tell these stories. He said that at one point Bob Dylan said that he only wanted Thunderclap Newman to do this song for the Basement Tape, and that was Open the Door Homer. He said, I don't want anybody else recording it, I only want Thunderclap Newman to do it. So he gave exclusive rights for them to record it, which they did. Keith Moon used to join when Speedy wouldn't be able to...
that was the
or
last
wouldn't
gig.
show up.
The last gig that Thunderclap Newman played, yeah.
Yes.
Kind of an anecdote. Somewhere near Waterloo. And it was the last gig, and Keith Moon arrived and completely thrashed the kit. I mean, it was in pieces.
He was trying to help.
Yeah, just completely thrashed the kit. And that, you know, that was...
That's how you have to travel.
Yeah,
These
that
were
was
the
the last
stories.
gig.
I mean, Andy said that it was sometimes, although horrifying, he loved it. And he said Keith Moon was a real fan of the band and wanted to be a part of the band. Liked it so much. You know?
Oh, but I've asked Andy, where did you acquire all this knowledge? How can you retain this apart from having a good memory? He said, well, when the band was touring, Thunderclap Newman, the lights would go off and with the girls and get drunk and all that business, whereas he would go to the hotel room with, you know, a pile of books and would just read and read and read. Well, there you go. So he wasn't a genius, he was just somebody who worked hard.
Very cerebral.
And retained all the information.
Another thing is with Pete Townsend as well, which is something to really give him full credit for, is the ultimate control over creating this thing came from him in terms of the idea of putting this ridiculous two kinds of music, you know, together, which shouldn't work.
Yeah, yeah.
But he worked very hard to make it work. In some cases, he had to speed things up and slow things down. So Andy said that some of the tracks are actually, you know, sort of sped up because the vocals were so hard, so high.
But how did Pete Townsend get Speedy to sing at that high? He would normally not reach this note by apparently spanking him, by hitting him, and he was
Sounds
yelping.
abusive, but I don't think at the time it really was
Apparently,
that.
it hurt so much. He physically abused Speedy, but got the result.
Apparently an exhaustive recording session which came out with one of the greatest albums, I think,
Yeah.
you know.
Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it's a damn good story.
Absolutely.
I was so verbose earlier on, I didn't have time to read a message from the very man who directed the film, Joe McGrath. Andy was a delightful man. I saw him 2 or 3 times, and we always had long chats and jokes. I knew something in the air before I made the film. So when I was going to shoot that sequence where all the pompous toffs go into the excrement for money, I had the song in mind because of the line, call out the instigator because the revolution's here. I liked the track so much that I worked out the shots to fit the playback of the music. People passing over Waterloo Bridge heard the music blaring out and saw this giant tank of excrement arriving and filling up the pool. And they stopped to see what was happening, which was exactly what we wanted, and we managed to film it. The idea of the film is that people will do anything for money. So when we told the extras they would have to jump in and fish around for money, the funny thing was that they said, we're not doing that. So the producer said, we'll give you an extra $5 each. And they all said, okay, we'll do it. So they proved the whole point of the film. By the way, it was muddy water and plastic joke turds, so it wasn't real. Don't tell anyone else that because it spoils the film. Anyway, here we go.
Almost ready for you. Anytime now. Not long now for free money. Free money. Don't rush the stairway. Yeah, very soon. And it's free. Remember that. Free money. Cost you nothing. Arriving now. Arriving now.
It's a guy, Grant.
Grand, yes, yes.
This your order, then?
Let's have a look. Is this right, son? 100 gallons of blood, 200 gallons of urine, 500 cubic feet of animal manure. Yeah.
Where do you want it put?
Put it in the vat.
Put it in vat, Fred.
it, Dad. Very good indeed. A bit literal, I suppose, if one goes into it. And they're certainly going to. Right, young one. There must be a simpler way. This is it. Well, let's give it a try.
Here. What's going on? Oi, come on here. You can't do that, you can't. It's against park regulations. Sod the regulations. You can keep here any night you like. Good night, gents.